Today, I want to share with you a deeply personal story. It's not my story, but it's one that moved me deeply. The story of a woman named Lyanna, her husband Mark, and their little son Leo. It's a tale of struggle, love, and the quiet strength that holds a family together when everything seems to be falling apart. Listen closely, because this could be the story of anyone you know. My name is Lyanna. I am a woman of 30 years, standing at what many would call the beginning of real life. Yet I feel as though I have already lived through a lifetime of quiet hopes and silent struggles. I share my days, my dreams, and the very air of our small world with my husband, Mark. He is the anchor of my heart, a man whose love is as solid and true as the ground beneath our feet. Our joy, our greatest treasure, is our son, Leo. At 4 years old, he is a whirlwind of laughter and boundless energy. His smile a tiny sun that lights up the shadows in our corners. Our universe is contained within the walls of a small apartment on a quiet, forgotten street. It is a humble place, with one bedroom where we all sleep, one small living room where we gather, and one kitchen where I weave simple meals into the fabric of our days. It is not big. Sometimes it feels like the walls themselves are breathing in, holding us close. But within these walls we have built a sanctuary. It is not made of expensive things or spacious rooms, but of something far more precious, our care for one another. We do not have many material possessions, but we take care of each other with a tenderness that needs no price tag. My husband Mark was a construction worker. Every morning, he would leave before the sun had fully claimed the sky, his body already braced for the day's labor. He worked for a construction company, a job that demanded everything from him. He carried heavy boxes, his muscles straining under weights I could scarcely imagine. He fixed walls, his hands becoming rough with plaster and dust. He worked under the scorching, unforgiving sun until his skin burned, and he worked in the cold, biting rain until his bones ached. It was a life of physical sacrifice. He did not earn much money. His salary was a number we calculated down to the last coin, a sum that helped us pay the rent for this small shelter, the bills that arrived like clockwork, and the food that sustained our little family for the week. There was never anything extra. No money for new clothes that weren't patched and repurposed, no money for trips to see the world beyond our neighborhood, no money for the simple fun things other families might take for granted. A toy for Leo, a meal at a restaurant, a cake with candles. But we were and are a simple family. Our desires were not for luxury. We did not dream of grand houses or fast cars. We wanted peace. The peace that comes from a full stomach, a safe roof, and love that fills the silence. Yet, even in that simplicity, the human heart cannot help but wish for a little more comfort, a small buffer against the constant worry. Mark, my strong, quiet Mark, always carried a deeper wish. In the evenings, when his body was tired and his eyes heavy, he would hold my hand and tell me of his dreams. Lyanna, he would say, his voice a low rumble of hope and frustration. I want to give you and Leo a better life one day, a better job, more money. I want to look at you both and feel proud, to know I am providing all that you deserve. His words were filled with such earnest desire it made my heart ache. I always told him he was already a good man, that he was more than enough. And I meant it. The love and safety he provided were worth more than any fortune. But inside, in the secret chambers of my own heart, I too nurtured small, fragile wishes. I wished for a nice dress, one that wasn't faded from countless washes, something to make me feel bright and new. I wished for a small, store-bought cake for Leo's birthday, with blue icing and a number for candle. Most of all, I wished for a little freedom from the constant, gnawing worry about money, a single month where the numbers added up without a struggle. Then, one evening, everything seemed to shimmer with new possibility. Mark came home, and the moment he walked through the door, I could see it. He had a big smile, one that reached his eyes and made them bright, as if lit from within by a spark of pure hope. The weariness of the day had vanished, replaced by an energy I hadn't seen in months. He sat beside me on our worn sofa, took my hands in his rough, calloused ones and held them gently. Lyanna, he said, his voice trembling slightly with excitement. My boss called me today. He said my hard work has been noticed. Next month I will get a promotion. For a moment the world stopped. Then, my heart jumped with a joy so sharp and sudden it felt like pain releasing. Promotion. More money. Stability. For the first time in a long time, a heavy weight lifted from my chest. I felt light, as if I could float. I felt a sense of freedom I had almost forgotten existed. I felt truly, deeply happy. That evening, our small apartment was filled with a golden light. Mark hugged Leo, lifting him high into the air. Our son's delighted giggles echoing off the walls. Papa will have a better job soon, Leo. A better job for us, Mark proclaimed, and Leo laughed and clapped his small hands. We ate our simple dinner that night with a sense of celebration, talking and dreaming aloud. I imagined our life with a bigger income. I pictured a small celebration for Leo with that cake. I imagined the feel of a new dress against my skin. I could almost taste a meal at a restaurant, a novelty we hadn't experienced in years. Everything felt warm, bright, and full of promise. But life, as we were cruelly reminded, can change direction faster than the wind. The warmth of that evening became a precious, distant memory. 2 weeks later, the promise shattered. Mark came home late, long after the streetlights had flickered on. He didn't call out my name. He simply entered, and the atmosphere in our home shifted instantly. His face was a mask of seriousness. All the light from that hopeful evening drained away. His eyes, once so bright, looked hollow and tired. He did not smile. He sat heavily on a chair, staring at nothing. I felt my heartbeat accelerate, a frantic drumming against my ribs. What is wrong, Mark? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He did not look at me. Instead, he put his face in his hands, his shoulders slumping as if carrying an immense, invisible burden. After a long, painful moment that stretched into eternity, he spoke, his voice muffled by his palms. They let me go. A coldness spread through me, starting in my stomach and freezing my veins. For a second, my mind refused to process the words. They made no sense. What do you mean? I asked, clinging to a sliver of denial. Mark took a deep, shuddering breath, as if preparing to dive into deep water. He lifted his head, and I saw his eyes were wet, glistening with unshed tears. He tried to hold them back, to be strong, but the pain inside him was a raw, visible thing. The company, he said, each word an effort. They are closing some offices, cutting costs. They said, there is no more work for me. They fired me. I felt the floor move beneath my feet, a dizzying, unreal sensation. I looked at my husband, my strong provider, and saw a man broken by a few words from a boss. The shame and despair in his eyes were unbearable. I quickly sat beside him, wrapping my arms around him, holding his hand tightly. We will be fine, I said, the words automatic. You will find a new job. We will manage. I said these things to comfort him, to be the strong one for a moment. But inside, a deep, primal fear uncoiled. Our life was already a delicate balancing act. Now the tightrope had snapped. Felt impossible. That night, sleep was a stranger. I lay beside Mark, listening to his uneven breathing, and stared at the cracks in the ceiling for hours. My mind was a whirlwind of terrifying calculations. The rent, the electricity bill, the water bill, Leo's needs, the small amount of money we had saved, a meager sum that represented years of tiny sacrifices. It might last 1 month, maybe 2 if we stretched every coin until it screamed. And after that, the question hung in the dark room, a specter of uncertainty. I tried to be quiet in my worry. I didn't want Mark to hear my restless thoughts, to feel my fear trembling through the mattress. I knew he already felt like he had failed us, that the foundation of his pride as a husband and father had crumbled. My job was to hold the pieces together, even if I was cracking inside. The next morning, a new chapter of our struggle began. Mark woke up even earlier than he did for his construction job, a determined set to his jaw. "I will start looking for work right away," he announced, his voice firm but lacking its usual resonance. He took out his old laptop, its keys faded from use, and sat at our small kitchen table, transforming it into a command center for a desperate campaign. He sent out countless CVs into the void of the internet, each email a tiny prayer. He wrote personalized cover letters until his eyes were red. He scoured job websites, clicking on links until his fingers were sore. He called every company he could think of, his voice growing increasingly rehearsed and hopeful with each call. He left the house dressed in his best interview clothes, a shirt slightly too tight, trousers worn thin at the knees, and walked from one side of the city to the other under the relentless sun, returning every evening covered in a fine layer of dust and defeat. "Did you get the job?" I would ask, the question becoming a daily ritual of hope and dread. His answer was always the same, a quiet, defeated, "No, not yet." Each no was a stone added to the burden on his shoulders. I watched him change before my eyes. His shoulders, once broad and strong from physical labor, became permanently bowed, as if carrying the weight of our entire world. The light in his eyes, which had briefly sparkled with hope, dimmed into a flat, dark worry. His voice grew quieter, as if he was afraid to speak too loudly and disturb the fragile peace of our worrying home. Weeks bled into a month, then two. The numbers in our savings account dwindled with terrifying speed, a digital countdown to zero. I became a master of economy. I cooked cheaper and cheaper food, more rice, more beans, less meat. Sometimes we ate the same simple meal for 2 days in a row. When Leo's shoes developed a hole, I didn't buy new ones. I sat on the floor with a tube of strong glue, carefully sealing the gap, my heart aching at the sight. I stopped buying anything that wasn't an absolute necessity. No snacks, no magazines, no lipstick to brighten my tired face. When a spoon handle broke, I didn't replace it. We simply made do with one less. Every coin was a soldier in a war we were losing. One afternoon, in a moment of quiet desperation, I took off my wedding ring. It was a simple band, not expensive, but to me it was a universe of meaning. When Mark had slipped it onto my finger, it felt like a promise. A promise of a shared life, of partnership through thick and thin. Now, that promise was being tested in fire. We needed money for rent more than I needed a symbol on my finger. With tears blurring my vision, I sold it to a small jewelry shop. The man behind the counter gave me a sympathetic look that was almost worse than indifference. I used the money to pay the most pressing bills. I cried bitterly afterwards, mourning not just the ring, but the loss of the normal, stable life it represented. A small lifeline appeared from an unexpected source. My friend Sarah came to visit one day. She found me in the kitchen, stirring a large pot of stew. She leaned in, inhaled the aroma, and tasted a small spoonful. Her eyes widened in genuine surprise. "Lyanna, this is delicious. Really, truly good. Have you ever thought about selling your food?" I looked at her, confused. The idea had never crossed my mind. I cooked to feed my family, to show love, to survive. The concept of cooking for strangers, for money, felt foreign. "Many women are doing it now," Sarah explained enthusiastically. "They post pictures online on community groups. People are always looking for good homemade meals. It could bring in a little something." A spark of possibility ignited in my chest. That night, over a sparse dinner, I tentatively broached the idea with Mark. He immediately looked upset, a flash of pain crossing his face. "No," he said, his voice tight. "You do not need to work. You already do too much taking care of Leo and this house. I will find a job. It is my responsibility. Do not worry about money." His words were meant to be protective, but they felt like a cage. I could see the shame behind them, the belief that if his wife had to work, it was a testament to his failure. I reached out and touched his arm gently, feeling the tense muscle beneath his skin. "It is just until you find a job, my love," I said softly. "A little help. A way to pay for groceries so our savings last longer. We are a team, remember?" He was silent for a long time, staring at his plate. Finally, he gave a slow, reluctant nod. Okay, just until I find something. And so, Lyanna's home kitchen was born. I took pictures of my best dishes with my old phone, the lighting poor but the food looking hearty and warm. I posted them in local community groups online. At first, there was only silence. Then one order. Then another. Soon, I had 2 or 3 orders a week. Then 5. The money was small, often just enough to cover the cost of the ingredients for the next batch with a little left over. But that little left over bought milk for Leo, bread for our table. It was a lifeline. However, it also stretched my days into an endless marathon. My life became a cycle of relentless labor. I woke up early to make breakfast for Leo. I cleaned the house. I shopped for the cheapest ingredients. I cooked large batches for customers, my small kitchen steaming hot. I packaged the meals carefully. I arranged for deliveries or pickups. I washed towering piles of dishes. I soothed Leo when he needed attention. I put him to sleep, singing softly until my voice was hoarse. And then I washed more dishes. By nightfall, I was a shell. My hands would shake with fatigue. A constant ache settled deep in my lower back. My eyes felt so heavy it was a physical effort to keep them open. But I pushed through the exhaustion because the alternative, the silence of no orders, the emptiness of the cupboard, was far more frightening. Mark continued his daily quest. He expanded his search, applying for jobs far beneath his skill level. He swallowed his pride and asked for work as a cleaner, a driver, a warehouse packer. The rejections kept coming, a monotonous chorus of no. I could see he was trying, truly trying with every fiber of his being. But after months of this relentless stress, of watching him shrink and my own body ache, something inside me began to curdle. The shared burden started to feel uneven. A heavy loneliness settled in my heart, a feeling that I was holding up the sky all by myself, my arms trembling from the strain. The breaking point came on an unremarkable, terrible evening. I was in the kitchen, frying some vegetables for a customer's order. The oil was spitting, the air thick and greasy. Leo started crying in his bedroom, a tired, frustrated wail. In my hurry to check on him, I jerked the pan, and a spray of scalding oil landed on the back of my hand. A sharp, searing pain shot up my arm. At that exact moment, overwhelmed by the burn, the crying, the fatigue, and the mountain of worries, I looked into the living room. Mark was sitting on the sofa, staring blankly at the wall. The day's defeat etched into every line of his body. Something snapped. My voice, when it came out, was not my own. It was sharp, ragged, filled with months of suppressed frustration and fear. "What are you doing?" I almost shouted. "You promised you would find something. Anything. Look at me. I work all day. I cook for strangers. I clean, I take care of Leo, I worry about every single bill, every coin. I am carrying this family, and I am so tired, Mark." I was shaking. My burnt hand throbbed in time with my racing heart. Mark did not shout back. He did not get angry. He simply turned his head and looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw a devastation so complete it stole my breath. All the fight had been drained out of him, leaving only a deep, quiet sorrow. "I am trying, Lyanna," he said, his voice so soft it was almost a whisper. It was the sound of a man who had nothing left to give, a man hollowed out by failure. "I am trying every day." In that moment, my anger evaporated, replaced by a flood of guilt and shame so intense it made me nauseous. I wasn't angry at him. I was angry at the situation, at the universe that was grinding us down. But he had received all of it, absorbed it as proof of his own inadequacy. Without another word, he stood up, walked past me, opened the front door, and sat down on the cold concrete steps outside. I finished the task robotically, washed the dishes with my burnt hands stinging, and checked on Leo, who had cried himself to sleep. Then, through the window, I watched my husband. He was just a silhouette against the dim streetlight, sitting alone with his head in his hands. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. I had wanted to shake him awake, to make him fight. But I realized, with a crushing certainty, that he was fighting. The battlefield was just inside him, and it was a war of attrition he was losing. I didn't go out to him that night. The shame kept me rooted inside. We had wounded each other, not out of malice, but out of sheer, desperate survival. The factory job Mark secured was a small victory, but in our world of stretched budgets and mounting pressures, it felt like finding a single lifeboat in a stormy sea. It kept us from drowning immediately, but we were still miles from any safe shore. Mark's new routine began before dawn. He would wake at 4:30 a.m., the silence of our apartment broken only by his careful movements as he dressed in the dark, trying not to disturb Leo or me. He wore the same pair of sturdy pants and a plain blue work shirt every day. We couldn't afford a second set. The factory was on the other side of the city, a long commute requiring 2 buses and a 20-minute walk. He left with a simple lunch I packed the night before. A sandwich, a piece of fruit, sometimes a hard-boiled egg if we could spare it. His work was monotonous and physically demanding. He operated a machine that stamped metal parts, a job that required constant attention but no real skill. The noise was deafening, the air thick with the smell of oil and hot metal. For 10 hours a day, he stood on a concrete floor, feeding sheets of metal into the hungry jaws of the press, watching identical pieces fall out the other side. He earned just enough to cover our rent and utilities, with a tiny buffer that disappeared the moment an unexpected expense arose. Leo needing new shoes, a higher than usual electricity bill, a bus fare increase. My own days became an intricate dance of survival. Lyanna's home kitchen was no longer just a side hustle. It was our financial backbone. The orders had grown steadily through word of mouth. What began as 2 or 3 meals a week had become 10 to 12. I was cooking for strangers before my own family had breakfast. The kitchen, always warm, now felt like a perpetual sauna. Steam from boiling pots fogged the single window. The scent of onions, garlic, and spices was woven into the very fabric of our home, our clothes, our hair. I became an expert in economy, not just of money, but of time and energy. I cooked in massive batches. A giant pot of stew could become 5 different meals with slight variations. Rice was our canvas. Beans were our protein. I learned which vegetables were cheapest on which days. I woke at 5 a.m. to prep, cooked from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m., packaged orders until 4 p.m., and then collapsed into the evening routine of cleaning, caring for Leo, and starting dinner for us. The fatigue was a living thing, a weight I carried in my bones. My hands, always in water or handling hot pans, became red and rough. Sometimes, in the quiet moment before sleep, I would look at them in the dim light and not recognize them. They were the hands of a much older woman, a woman who had worked a lifetime. I was 30, but I felt 50. And through it all, there was Leo, our beautiful, innocent Leo, who was starting to notice the shadows in our home. He stopped asking for toys or treats when we went past store windows. Instead, he would press his face against the glass, look longingly, and then take my hand and say, "It's okay, Mama, maybe next time." His quiet acceptance broke my heart more than any tantrum ever could. He saw Mark leave before the sun and come home after dark. He saw me constantly in the kitchen, my brow furrowed in concentration or worry. One afternoon, he brought me his small blanket and wrapped it around my shoulders as I stood stirring a pot. "You cold, Mama?" he asked. I hadn't even realized I was shivering from exhaustion. Mark and I became like 2 satellites orbiting the same planet but rarely crossing paths. He left before I was fully awake. I was in the thick of cooking when he was on his lunch break. He returned exhausted, often falling asleep on the sofa after a silent dinner. Our conversations became purely functional, exchanged in tired murmurs. Rent paid. Yes. Leo needs a doctor's appointment. I'll call tomorrow. Electric bill came. How much? The warmth, the shared dreams, the quiet comfort of simply being together. It was being eroded, replaced by the gritty determination to just get through another day. We were a team, but we were 2 exhausted soldiers in a trench, passing ammunition but too tired to speak. The strain showed most in Mark's eyes. The factory job was a salve on the wound of his unemployment, but it was also a blow to his spirit. This was not the better job he had dreamed of. This was not something that made him feel proud as a provider. It was a means to an end, a daily surrender of his dignity for a paycheck that barely met our needs. He stopped talking about the future. When I tried to bring up small dreams, maybe next summer we could go to the park for a whole day, he would just nod vaguely and say, "We'll see." I missed my husband. I missed the man who would laugh and lift Leo into the air. I missed the man who held my hand just to feel it in his. Now, when he touched me, it was usually to take a heavy pot from my hands or to gently move me aside because he needed to get to the sink. We were co-managers of a crisis, not partners in a life. The breaking point, when it came, was over something laughably small. A spoon. It was a Thursday. Rain had been drumming against the window all afternoon, casting the small apartment in a gloomy gray light. I had 13 orders to fulfill, a record, and the pressure was a tight band around my temples. The kitchen was chaos. 3 pots bubbling on the stove, vegetables covering every inch of counter space, the air thick and humid. Leo had a slight fever and was clingy, wanting to be held, which made the precise work of packaging meals nearly impossible. I had him propped on my hip, my body aching from the awkward angle. Mark was due home any minute. I was behind schedule and a customer was coming to pick up their order. I stared at it. A simple, cheap spoon. One of the last 4 we owned. And something inside me snapped. It wasn't just the spoon. It was everything. It was the endless cycle of cooking and cleaning. It was the fear that lurked behind every bill. It was the ache in my back that never went away. It was the look in Mark's eyes that grew more distant each day. It was Leo's feverish cheek against my neck. It was the spoon, lying there on the dirty floor, representing every broken thing, every diminished dream, every ounce of energy I no longer had. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, holding Leo, staring at the spoon, and felt a terrifying emptiness open up inside me. A void where my hope used to be. That's when Mark walked in. He was soaked from the rain, his work clothes dark with water, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked exhausted, hollowed out. He saw the chaos, saw me standing frozen, saw the spoon on the floor. Without a word, he walked over, bent down. A movement that seemed to require tremendous effort, and picked it up. He rinsed it quietly under the tap and placed it back in the rack. Then he turned to me. "Long day?" he asked, his voice flat. Something about the simplicity of the question, the sheer inadequacy of it to address the mountain of despair I was standing under, made the emptiness turn to a sudden white-hot rage. "Long day." My voice came out quiet, dangerously calm. "Yes, Mark. It's been a long day. It's been a long month. It's been a long year." I set Leo down gently, guiding him to the corner with his toys. Then I turned back to my husband. "I have cooked for 13 strangers today," I said, each word precise and sharp. "I have washed this floor twice because Leo spilled his juice. I have packaged meals until my fingers cramped. I have soothed a sick child while balancing him on my hip. I have calculated and recalculated our money, knowing it's not enough. I have looked at this spoon and I have thought, if this breaks, we cannot afford a new one." Mark stood still, the rain dripping from his clothes onto the floor. "I know it's hard," he began. "Do you? The dam broke. Do you really know, Mark? You go to your job. You come home. You eat. You sleep. You live in this struggle. But do you feel its weight on your skin every second? Do you lie awake wondering what will happen if one of us gets really sick? Do you look at your son and feel terror because you can't give him the childhood he deserves?" His face tightened. "You think I don't feel that? You think I wanted this? To work like a machine in a factory? To come home to a wife who looks at me with resentment?" "Resentment." I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "This isn't resentment, Mark. This is exhaustion. This is carrying a load meant for 2 people, for 10 people. I am trying to keep this family alive with my bare hands, and I am so tired that I'm starting to forget what we're even fighting for." We were shouting now, the first real fight we'd had in months. All the unspoken fears, the buried frustrations, the lonely burdens came pouring out in a torrent of angry, hurtful words. We were not attacking each other, but the situation, the invisible enemy that was slowly crushing us. In our pain, we became its instruments, wounding each other with the very sharp edges of our shared struggle. Leo began to cry, a soft, confused whimper from his corner. The sound punctured the anger instantly. Mark and I stopped, both turning to look at our son, who was watching us with wide, scared eyes. He had never seen us like this. The fight drained out of me, leaving only a profound, weary shame. Mark's shoulders slumped, the anger replaced by a look of utter defeat. Without a word, he turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving the door open behind him. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, then nothing. I sank to the floor, right there in the messy kitchen, and pulled Leo into my arms. I rocked him, whispering apologies into his hair, as the rain continued to fall outside. I had wanted Mark to wake up to fight, but I had only succeeded in making him feel like a failure. And in doing so, I had failed him too. That night, we slept in silence, a wide, cold space between us in our bed. The argument hung in the air, a ghost neither of us could confront. We had faced poverty, uncertainty, and exhaustion. But this rift between us felt like the greatest danger of all. The morning after our fight dawned gray and quiet. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside our window looking washed and weary, mirroring exactly how I felt inside. The space next to me in bed was empty and cold. Mark had come home late, after I'd already fallen into a fitful sleep, and had slept on the sofa. The silence in our small apartment was heavier than any noise. I moved through my morning routine like a ghost. Wake up. Check on Leo, who was sleeping peacefully, his fever gone. Start the coffee. Look at the kitchen. Still a mess from yesterday's battle. Pots and pans were stacked in the sink, the floor was sticky in spots, and that same metal spoon lay in the drying rack, a tiny monument to our breaking point. I didn't have the energy to cry. I just felt numb, a hollowed-out version of myself. The fight had released the pressure valve of my anger, but now all that was left was a cold dread. Had we broken something last night that couldn't be fixed? Were we now just two people sharing a space, bound by struggle but not by love? I heard the sofa creak, then Mark's quiet footsteps. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in yesterday's clothes, his hair disheveled, his eyes shadowed. He looked at me, then at the floor, then back at me. We stood there, separated by only a few feet of linoleum, but it felt like a canyon. "I'm sorry," we both said at the same time, our voices quiet and raw. The simultaneous apology broke some of the tension. A flicker of the old connection, the unspoken understanding that had always been our foundation. "I shouldn't have shouted," I said, leaning against the counter for support. "I wasn't angry at you, Mark. I was just so tired." "I know," he said, his voice rough. He ran a hand over his face. "I shouldn't have walked out. I didn't know what to say. Everything you said was right. I feel it too. The failure, the fear. I carry it every day to that factory and back." He took a step into the kitchen, his eyes taking in the disorder. "You do everything," he said. And it wasn't an accusation, but a statement of odd, painful fact. "You hold this whole world together. And I just go to a job that feels like it's sucking my soul out, and come home too empty to even help." It was the most honest he'd been in months. He wasn't defending or deflecting. He was just stating the bleak reality of our lives. "It's not your fault," I said, and meant it. "The job, it's honest work, puts food on the table. It's not what we dreamed of." "No," he agreed quietly. "It's not." Leo's sleepy voice called from the bedroom. "Mama? Papa?" The sound pulled us back from the edge of despair, back into our roles as parents. Mark went to get him, and I heard their murmurs, Leo's soft questions, Mark's low, reassuring answers. When they came out, Leo in Mark's arms, our son looked between us, his little face searching. "No more sad?" Leo asked, touching Mark's stubbled cheek. Mark hugged him close. "No more sad, buddy. We didn't magically solve everything that morning. The rent was still due. The kitchen was still a mess. Mark still had to go to a job he hated, and I still had a mountain of orders to cook. But something had shifted. The unspoken resentment had been spoken. The loneliness we'd both felt in our shared struggle had been acknowledged. We cleaned the kitchen together. Mark washed, I dried. We didn't talk much, but the silence was no longer hostile. It was the quiet companionship of two people who had weathered a storm and found they were still in the same boat. As he was leaving for work, Mark paused at the door. He looked back at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a spark of his old self, not the defeated man, but the determined one. "Lyanna," he said, "this isn't forever. I promise you, this job, this struggle, it's just a season. We will get through it." I nodded, wanting to believe him. I know. After he left, the apartment felt different. The weight was still there, but it felt shared again. We were bruised, but not broken. The next week passed in our new, fragile normal. Mark went to work, cooked. We were careful with each other, like people walking on ice that had just refrozen. We talked more small things, not just bills and schedules. We remembered to ask, "How was your day?" and actually listened to the answer. Then, on Friday afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting any deliveries or customers. Pickups were always arranged in advance. Wiping my hands on my apron, I opened the door. A woman stood there, well-dressed in a stylish but not flashy pantsuit, carrying a leather folder. She looked to be in her late 40s, with kind eyes and a professional smile. "Lyanna Reynolds?" she asked. "Yes," I said, suddenly self-conscious of my simple clothes and the cooking smells that wafted out the door. "My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm a social worker with the city's Family Support and Entrepreneurship Initiative." She handed me a business card. "May I come in for a moment? I promise I won't take much of your time." Confused but polite, I let her in, quickly clearing a space at our small table. Leo peeked out from his room, and I motioned for him to stay back. "What is this about?" I asked, my mind racing. Had someone reported us? Were we in trouble? "It's about your business, actually," Mrs. Carter said, opening her folder. "Lyanna's Home Kitchen. We run a city program that identifies small, home-based food businesses with potential for growth. Your name came to our attention through, let's call it a community nomination." I stared at her. "A nomination? By who?" She smiled. "We protect the privacy of our nominators. But let's just say someone who's enjoyed your food believes you have a real talent and that you could use some support to grow." She explained the program. It offered microloans with zero interest, business mentorship, and, most importantly, access to a licensed commercial kitchen space for a heavily subsidized rate. The kitchen was located in a community center, fully equipped, and available during off hours. "It would allow you to increase your production safely and legally," she said. "You could take more orders, maybe even explore wholesale options to local cafes. The mentorship would help you with pricing, marketing, and bookkeeping." I listened, my heart beating faster with each word. It sounded too good to be true. A way out of my steaming, cramped kitchen. A chance to actually build something. "What's the catch?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "No catch," she said gently. "The program is funded by a city grant. Our only goal is to help families achieve stability and self-sufficiency through small business. We believe in investing in people, Mrs. Reynolds. In people like you." She left me with an application packet and a promise to follow up. I sat at the table for a long time after she left, holding the papers, feeling the smooth texture of the business card. A lifeline, a real, tangible chance. That evening, when Mark came home, tired and dusty, I didn't greet him with the usual tired smile. I was practically vibrating with nervous energy. "Mark, sit down. You need to see this." I told him everything, the words tumbling out. I showed him the packet, Mrs. Carter's card. I explained about the kitchen, the loan, the mentorship. He listened, his exhaustion fading, replaced by a dawning hope. This is real?" "It seems to be," I said. "But Mark, it would mean a commitment. More work for me, at least at first. And there's still a small fee for the kitchen, and we'd have to be approved. He took my hands, cutting me off. His hands were rough and warm around mine. Lyanna, this is it. This is the chance we've been waiting for. This is you, your talent, your hard work, being recognized. His eyes were bright, the way they'd been that evening long ago when he talked about his promotion. We'll find the fee. I'll pick up extra hours. Whatever it takes. You apply. We're doing this. For the first time in a year, we didn't talk about survival. We talked about a future. We stayed up late that night, hunched over the application at our small table, filling it out together under the single kitchen light. Leo slept peacefully in the next room. Outside, the quiet street was dark, but inside our small apartment, for the first time in so long, it felt like dawn. The approval letter was not just a piece of paper. It was a key to a door we thought was permanently locked. The family support program changed everything. With access to the commercial kitchen, my small business, Lyanna's Home Kitchen, blossomed from a desperate hustle into something real, something sustainable. The next 6 months were a blur of hard work, but it was a different kind of tired. It was the satisfying exhaustion of creation, not the draining fatigue of survival. I expanded my menu. I gained corporate clients who ordered lunches for their small offices. Mr. Garcia, my mentor, helped me price my food correctly so that for the first time, my labor was actually valued. The extra income wasn't a fortune, but it was steady, reliable, and it gave us breathing room. Mark, empowered by this shift, found a new dignity in his own work. The factory promotion came through, and with it, a small but significant raise. More importantly, he was seen. His reliability and quiet strength were recognized. He didn't just operate a machine anymore, he helped manage a team. The shadows under his eyes remained, but now they were from honest labor, not from the gnawing anxiety of failure. One evening, as we sat together after putting Leo to sleep, a now regular ritual we had reclaimed, Mark showed me his phone. On the screen was a simple, clean web page. "What's this?" I asked. "I've been learning," he said, a shy pride in his voice. "In my breaks at work. Basic web design. This is for you. For Lyanna's Home Kitchen. So people can order online. So you're not just relying on community group posts." I looked at the website. It was simple, with Leo's son logo smiling in the corner, a gallery of my food, and an easy order form. It was beautiful. It was professional. It was ours. "Mark, you did this? For us," he corrected gently. "Always for us." That moment encapsulated our journey. We were no longer two people drowning separately, trying to drag each other to safety. We were a team, each building their part of the raft. Cooked. He built the platform. Together, we were creating a future. The seasons turned. Leo started kindergarten, his little backpack almost as big as he was. We waved him off from the doorway of our same small apartment. But the feeling was different. We weren't clinging to the edge anymore. We were standing firmly, hand in hand, watching our son step into his own new world. On a crisp autumn morning, exactly 1 year after the day I had stood burning my hand with oil, feeling the whole world collapse, I received my first catering order for a wedding. A small, intimate wedding of 50 people. The bride had tasted my food at a friend's party. The payment was more than we used to earn in 2 months. I stood in the commercial kitchen, the vast, quiet space all mine for the day, and I allowed myself to feel it all. The fear, the struggle, the countless nights of worry, the taste of cheap meals stretched over days, the sting of selling my wedding ring, the crushing weight of feeling alone in a marriage. I let the memories wash over me, not as wounds, but as proof of our resilience. That evening, I came home with the smell of celebration still on my clothes. Mark had cooked dinner, a simple pasta a little overcooked but made with love. Leo chattered about his day at school. We ate at our small table, the 3 of us, and the room was filled with a warm, golden light. After dinner, Mark brought out a small box. Not a ring box. A small, plain white jewelry box. He placed it in front of me. "Open it," he said softly. Inside, on a bed of velvet, was a simple, elegant silver chain. And hanging from it, carefully soldered onto the chain, was my original, simple wedding band. I found a jeweler, Mark explained, his voice thick with emotion. He cleaned it, polished it, and he put it on this chain, so you can wear it again, close to your heart, where it always belonged, not as a sacrifice but as a badge of honor, for everything we survived. I couldn't speak. Tears welled up as I lifted the necklace. The ring, once sold for rent, now gleamed in the soft light, a tiny circle of metal that held our entire history. The promises, the struggles, the forgiveness, the unwavering choice to keep going. I put it on. The metal was cool against my skin, but it felt like warmth. Felt like coming home. Mark took my hand. We made it, Lyanna. Not to some imaginary finish line of wealth and ease. But we made it through. We're here. Together. And our son is happy and safe. That's the victory. That's the only luxury we ever really needed. He was right. We hadn't won the lottery. We hadn't moved to a big house. Mark still worked at the factory. I still cooked. But the fear was gone. The crushing pressure was gone. In its place was a hard-won peace. A deep-seated knowledge that whatever came next, we would face it as one. Our story is simple. It's the story of millions. It's the story of love that doesn't shout, but endures. Of hope that doesn't sparkle, but persists. It's the story that the greatest strength isn't found in never falling, but in always choosing to get back up, and to reach for each other's hand on the way. To everyone listening to Lyanna and Mark's journey, thank you for being part of their quiet victory. If their story reminded you that even in the darkest times, small acts of love and perseverance can light the way, please let us know. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of resilience. Share this story with someone who might be in their own season of struggle, to show them that seasons change. And most importantly, drop a comment below telling us what gives you strength during hard times. Your support means everything. If you want to hear more real, heartfelt stories about the everyday heroes among us, make sure you subscribe to Storycraft AI and ring that notification bell. We bring you new, powerful narratives every week. And for you right now, don't go anywhere. The video you see on your screen is our next story, one we think you'll connect with deeply. Give it a watch. Until next time, remember, your story isn't over. The toughest chapters often lead to the most beautiful endings. Keep writing yours.